On March 18th, 1990, the most audacious art heist of all time took place at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. Two men dressed as police officers were admitted into the building by security, claiming to be responding to a disturbance call.
In 81 minutes, 13 pieces of art were stolen. Among the portraits, stripped from their frames, were works by Vermeer, Degas, and Rembrandt. Estimated at $500 million, the heist has been categorized as the largest and most frustrating of all time. Theories of their whereabouts and those who perpetrated the crime are abundant.
In this podcast series, we will dig as deep as possible into the case, the theories, and the social and economic impact the greatest unsolved art heist of all time had on the community. This is Empty Frames. Welcome back to Empty Frames. I'm Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic today, Tim. This is yet another intro where you say welcome back to Empty Frames. What are we doing, regular episodes here? We're going to find the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heisted artwork in the next few weeks?
I hope so.
And how will you feel when we do?
I'll feel great. Top of the world, Lance.
And how are you feeling now?
Feeling good. And very excited to introduce this conversation that we have with filmmaker and author Barry Avrich, Lance. He wrote a book called The Devil Wears Rothko, and it is about the demise of a very well-known gallery in New York and sort of forgeries, a real intense forgery scheme, I'd even call it. And Barry is also a filmmaker and made a movie called Made You Look that was released on Netflix that is a very similar story to what this book is about. The book is called The Devil Wears Rothko, and it is out today as you're listening to this, June 24th, 2025.
And the subject is Anne Friedman, who is the former director of the Needler Gallery, and it really raises a question, and this is a question that we have discussed quite often when we're talking about the Gardner paintings or we're talking about any sort of artwork that is in the pop culture, that is in the conversation, and what is artwork. Some people say that the frames are more valuable than the artwork itself. And what Anne was a part of was this sort of scheme where a very talented unknown artist would create these replicas of famous paintings. And then those were sold as the originals. So it just causes one to try to wrap their mind around what the value is on any of these in the first place. And what laws are broken and how you even define those laws that are broken. Because as we know, art is all sort of subjective and in the eye of the beholder. So what's to say that this gentleman's artwork isn't as valuable in a sense as the original? I know the original's older, but the effort that this guy puts in doesn't that have some value put on it? So anyway, these are these moral, ethical, topics to kind of wrestle with if you want to explore those depths.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story, and I do think you'll enjoy this interview, and I would think you'd love the book as well. So check out the book, The Devil Wears Rothko. Check out the documentary, Made You Look, on Netflix, and we hope you enjoy this interview with director and author Barry Avrich. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. Hey, give us 5 stars wherever you're listening to this. And if you like what we do here on Empty Frames, check out Crawlspace and Missing. There are links in the show notes to those shows. And they release more often than we do here on Empty Frames. Welcome to the podcast, Barry Avrich. How are you today?
I am great. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you as well. Always love having a legitimate filmmaker on, someone who does dig into the stories that they cover, and you have quite a resume that is super impressive, and I can't wait to talk about what we're going to talk about today, because Tim and I are really into the whole concept of art and art heists and the value that is placed on artwork. But before we get into all of that, there's probably a couple people out there who might not know who you are. If you want to just fill them in and what brings you to the show, maybe a little bit about the body of work that you have.
Thank you. I'm a longtime documentary filmmaker, some close to 70 films, always very character-driven, from the famous to the infamous. Probably one of my more well-known documentaries is The Last Mogul, about infamous and legendary Lew Wasserman, the head of Universal Studios, and the really the first superpower agent before guys like Mike Ovitz and Ron Meyer. I love telling stories, been doing it for a long time, and thankfully there's never seems to be an end of any of the great stories that are around the corner. So, and of course, I love the rich and powerful that take a stumble.
Okay, great. And you have written a new book that's being released in June 2025. It's called The Devil Wears Rothko. And it kind of runs parallel to a documentary you made as well called Made You Look. Yeah, can you tell us about the two projects and how they may overlap a little bit?
Yeah, a couple of years back, I mean, I'm an art collector. I love the art world. I'm always amazed at what the process is in collecting art and buying art. You walk into an art gallery, quite often in New York City, the mecca of art, or in London or elsewhere, and the gallerists are really not that interested in helping you unless they really know who you are and you're a well-known collector. There's no prices on the walls. They'll often tell you it's sold. Often a lot of the art isn't even exhibited. It's in private rooms. Most of it's sold already. So a very complex process. And as I always say, a world you're really not invited to. So I made a film a couple of years back called Blurred Lines that unpacked the art world for Netflix. And a lot of people who were interviewed for the film, I think, later regretted it, because I really tried to demystify how that world worked. Fast forward to this incredible story about the largest art fraud in American history that took place at the Noodler Gallery, a 150-year-old gallery in New York City, where billionaires and museums and collectors and art consultants got fooled over a period of 10 years, $80 million worth of fake art. And I couldn't believe this. I was watching this in real time as Vanity Fair and New York Times was covering it. And I said, there's a documentary. Let's do this. And that was Made You Look, also for Netflix in the United States and elsewhere. And then my agent said to me, and I think there's a book here. And I said, well, who am I to write the book? There's journalists who covered this story. It was so great, so many great names, the Hammers and onwards. And he said, well, you made the film, you can write the book. So that is The Devil Wears Rothko.
Very cool. I just want to back up a little bit. You had mentioned that your films are very character-driven, and then you said they oftentimes involve the downfall of the powerful, or the rich and powerful, and experiencing that. Why is that the case for you? Why do you find that interesting, and how does that align with the art world?
I mean, I've been making documentaries for a long time, and it always amazes me. I've made films on two of them on Harvey Weinstein, another character from Canada who owned Broadway at one time, Garth Drabinsky, who was producing on Broadway. And it always amazes me, guys, that people who have so much, they've created so much art in the world, whether it's film, whether it's theater, whether it's art, publishing, doesn't matter. They've created so many great things. They have all the money in the world. They have all the power in the world, and yet they risk it. It's so Shakespearean, as if they think they're Icarus and can get a new set of wings. It just amazes me at how, power corrupts absolutely, as they say, and they'll take those chances. I remember when we were doing the second Harvey Weinstein film called The Reckoning for Hulu, and somebody said there comes a time where when you stop getting your own Perrier and picking your kids up at school, then you think you can get away with anything and everything, and they do. And so that intrigues me. And certainly in The Devil Wears Rothko, those that would take the chance and, not selling one or two paintings and walking away with hundreds of thousands of dollars, but would carry on this fraud for a decade. And I would have, if I sold one painting and walked away with a couple of $100,000 and fooled somebody, you're getting out of Dodge. Not these people.
I'd be done.
Yeah, that's good. That was a good take. Better not show up again. But for 10 years, one painting after another, all created by one artist, staggering.
Yeah, it really is staggering. Can we talk a little bit about the sort of characters in this story? Can we start with the Noodler Gallery?
Yes. Let me give you the cast. You have the Noodler Gallery, which was a 150-year-old gallery that began in France by a very well-respected art family, the Goupil family, who was trading in prints and maps. And suddenly, when a tremendous amount of wealth was being acquired, not only in Europe, but elsewhere in the world, there was a demand for art. So they opened an office or a branch or a gallery in New York City when the robber barons of the day, the steel and railway people, the Carnegies, the Rothschilds a little later on, the Astors, all the famous builders in New York City and Philadelphia and Pittsburgh were amassing fortunes and building mansions and estates. And they had a lot of empty walls and they needed art. And they were buying art by the yard, dozens of paintings. And the art world exploded. And certainly the Noodler Gallery was there for that time. And over the years, they sold and brokered incredible amounts of art to the very, very wealthy in the early days, and then followed that pattern as the art world was changing. So that is the Noodler Gallery. Over the years, it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Eventually, in the 70s, Armand Hammer, the great industrialist and philanthropist and flawed tycoon who was doing art deals in the Hermitage in Russia, buying their art when Russia needed money, needed wheat. He was brokering deals and he was taking art back. And he bought the Hammer Gallery, bought the Noodler Gallery for next to nothing, and moved it to the most extraordinary space in the Upper East Side in New York. That's when the Noodler Gallery, again, is seeing its halcyon days. They hire great, brilliant dealers and directors to run the gallery. And that's when we meet Anne Friedman, one of the great cast members in here, who begins as a receptionist at a gallery in Chelsea in New York City, sees the big deals being done and says, I don't want to get people coffee. I want to sell art. Look at the commissions people are making. I can do this. She studied art and she rises to the top. Hammer hires her to come to the Noodler Gallery, where she again takes over, selling ice to Eskimos, as they say, and unbelievably, as this meteoric trajectory, and gets extraordinarily successful. So we go from the Goupil family opening the Noodler Gallery in New York City to Armand Hammer to Anne Friedman, to the gallery then hitting some rough times because the art world is changing. We're now into what's called the abstract expressionist movement. Jackson Pollock, Robert Motherwell, de Kooning, Diebenkorn, Rothko, all of these great artists. And there's other galleries that are popping up and selling that art. And Noodler's kind of missing the boat. Warhol missing the boat on some of that. And Anne Friedman now has a problem. Armand Hammer's son, or grandson rather, Michael Hammer, takes over the gallery. It's a real estate play for him. Should he be in it? Should he not be in it? They're losing money. Anne Friedman, who was the queen of the art world and very powerful, is losing power, and she needs a Hail Mary. And in walks Glafira Rosales. And I can stop there or keep going, but that's when the whole world changes for Anne Friedman, the Noodler Gallery, Michael Hammer, and everyone, because Glafira Rosales, this nondescript Latin American woman, walks in with something wrapped in shards of cardboard.
Okay, so that's a really amazing moment in this whole storytelling. But I am curious why Anne Friedman started to lose touch with the art community. Why was she not seeing these like the Pollocks being worth any value? Where did that disconnect happen?
Well, it wasn't so much not seeing the Pollocks. You have to be very connected in the art world, and the art world is about trends. If you follow the galleries as I do, you have to create artist careers. You have to invest in them. You have to tell people, collectors, that I should buy a Tim Pilleri because it's going to be worth something, and you should have this in your collection, and this is important, and you can have it at this price. And they start off doing a multi-artist collection or exhibit in a gallery. Then they go to a solo and they pump up the price so it's really big and get there, and you have to invest. I think Anne Friedman, and it happens, galleries were missing some of the other new artists that were coming in. They were missing the connections. They had been a gallery that had been so involved for so long in masters and great works. The gallery, the Needler Gallery, also lost its director, Larry Rubin, who Anne Friedman pushed out to take control. He was a long-time great gallerist who came from the Castelli Gallery in New York City and had connections. And he took artists with him when he left. And so, Anne was missing some key trends. It happens. The world was changing in terms of what people were looking for, and she missed it. And so the gallery was in trouble. Damien Hirst, the artists like that were Kooning, Jeff Koons rather. There were some key artists that were coming up that were going to other galleries like Gagosian, very famous Larry Gagosian, was almost like the godfather of the gallery system with multi-branches all over the world that no one had seen before. So she was missing the trends.
And how did you get involved in, what makes you interested in this?
I'm interested in art because I'm sadly, I'm not in a room filled with it today, but I buy art and I collect art on the basis of how it makes me feel when I walk into a room, not because of its value or how I can trade it later on or whether an artist's values changes. A lot of people collect it as an asset value. So I just love it. I grew up in a house filled with art, not expensive because my parents, again, bought stuff that was intriguing to them. So I appreciated that. And my mother took me to galleries and museums all over the world. So I had an early education in it. And then I have a friend who I started traveling to New York City with because he's a major collector and getting into those private rooms and being so intrigued by this private world. I went to Art Basel in Switzerland, and which happens over a few days. That is the Super Bowl of art. Many collectors, the big ticket collectors, Steve Cohen, big hedge fund guy in New York, get shown stuff before it even goes to Switzerland, and he'll buy it based on a PDF or a thumbnail, a tiny piece, and say, I have to have that. So by the time I got to Switzerland and we were filming for the first documentary, Blurred Lines, and we had full access to it. So we had crews and everything like that. But the gallerists were not interested in me. As they don't know who I am as a collector. I'm not important. I'm not on the map. And they're almost kind of rude. So in some cases, we went into galleries in New York City. I went in with glasses with cameras in it to see how long it would take for anybody to even say hello or notice me. So I'm intrigued by the mystery. I'm intrigued, Lance, that it's the most unregulated market in the world. There's no rules. There's no prices. Who says that this can is worth $100,000? The gallery. And tomorrow it could be worth nothing. When we interviewed Lawrence Graff, the great billionaire jeweler, he said 98% of what I've collected is now worthless. But the 2% he's in love with and is worth hundreds of millions. But I just find it incredibly interesting.
And for the listeners out there, that can was a can of Celsius that you can get using promo code Crawlspace and Empty Frames for 10% off.
That's my boost in the morning. I don't drink coffee.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. And a thanks to our sponsors. Now back to the program.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about Glafira Rosales?
Okay. So Glafira Rosales is originally from Mexico, poor working class family, working in nursing school, has no knowledge about art, doesn't come from a family that collected art, doesn't really know what art is, and somehow has the misfortune of working as a nursing student when this gentleman, Carlos Bergantinos Diaz, comes into her hospital with an alleged bullfighting wound. And she treats him, and they fall in love. This is Bonnie and Clyde somehow meeting. And they fall in love, and he whisks her away to different places in Latin America where he has a dream to come to America like everybody else. That's where we should go. We need to get to New York City. They never marry. They have a child. They move to New York City. She will tell you and has said and has testified that she basically was living in some Stockholm syndrome situation where she just basically followed Carlos's direction with everything that he said, told her to do, that she was very well scripted. Others would say untrue. Carlos would say to me later on film, and we could talk about how I find him in some remote town in Spain as he fled the scandal. He will say, oh, no, she pushed me. She wanted status. So they get to New York City, and he gets a job delivering seafood. It's almost a scene out of Scarface, like the dishwasher, Tony Montana. And he gets a job delivering seafood and then says he thinks he can do it better. So he starts his own delivery service, and he starts delivering caviar around New York City. And there's so much traffic, and it's a colorful item. That's why I'm telling you this, not to bore you, but it's a colorful item in that the traffic is so bad, he buys an ambulance and calls it emergency caviar, and then puts the siren on and starts delivering caviar around New York City faster than anybody else, and starts delivering caviar to Sotheby's and Christie's auction houses, famous auction houses for auctions. So he'd deliver the caviar, and then he'd stay behind and he'd see and quite often the caviar that he was selling was also fake. He'd say it's beluga, put it in the wrong tin. So this is a man that's already, living in the shady area, the 50 shades of New York City in dealing in fakes. But he sees art being auctioned off as he's hanging around watching people eat his fake caviar. He sees people buying art for $500,000, $1 million, $7 million, $15 million. And he says, you know what, I'm in the wrong business. I need to be in the art world. And so he starts dabbling in buying art and selling art legitimately, and then sells off a couple of fakes here and there, and that kind of works. And he's starting to hatch his plan to hit the mother lode. And he walks by in Times Square. I don't know where you guys are located, but if you walk through Times Square, there's people that do caricatures and art and cartoons. And he runs into a Chinese artist who has painted copies of extraordinary art, abstract expressionist, Pollock's, incredible work. And he says to him, wow, could you do this, this, and this for me? And he gives him a test for some famous artists, and he could. So he now has a plan. Now, there's a difference, gentlemen, between a copy and a fake. A copy is a copy. It's worthless. You could charge what you want for it. It's a copy. A fake is, I'm asking you, Lance, to create a work in the style of Jackson Pollock. We're going to name it, and we're going to sign it Jackson Pollock, and we're going to say it's an original. That's a fake. And that's what he asked Pei Shen-Quinn, this fabulous character who had come from Shanghai, China, who had studied art in China, came to New York City, went to the Artist League with some of the greats like Ai Weiwei, and was a great artist, but frustrated that nobody was interested in his art. And there he was working as a house painter, a math teacher, tutor, and nobody was buying his art. And suddenly, Carlos Bergantinos Diaz and Glafira Rosales, Bonnie and Clyde, are buying his art. $600, $700, $1,000, and they're buying his art. And that's where Glafira and Carlos hatched this plan. What if we could sell this art? Whether Carlos was smart enough, gentlemen, to know that the Noodler Gallery and Anne Friedman needed a Hail Mary or not, I don't know. But on one fall crisp day in New York City, he schools Glafira Rosales on what she needs to know about Mark Rothko with an incredible fake backstory with enough details that sound real, and sends Glafira in dressed in Fendi, beautiful, looks great, and sends her into the Noodler Gallery. And this would be the ultimate test. Could this Mark Rothko that she has under her arm pass the test of the great Anne Friedman to say, I'll take it? Now, I'll just one step backwards, and then I'll let you guys continue and forgive me here. I want to define the word provenance for your audience. Provenance means proof, the background. Where does a painting come from? When you're buying a painting from a gallery, it will say it's from this artist. And if it's really valuable, here's the artist that painted it, Tim Pilleri, and it was sold to this gallery in 1972, then it went to this collector in 1985, and then it got exhibited here in 1992, and here's the last people that have it. Here's the trail of the provenance of the art. The best provenance in the world is Tim standing next to that painting, painting it, and then you go, well, he painted it, so it's got to be legitimate. The art that Glafira was bringing into the Noodler Gallery had fake provenance, no documents, just a lot of backstory and a lot of impressive sounding names. And he had schooled, Carlos and Glafira came up with a really good story. Also, Glafira was recommended to the gallery by somebody that Anne Friedman trusted. So in she comes in, she opens up the cardboard in Anne's viewing room at the Noodler Gallery, and it's a Rothko. And Anne sits there and is breathless and goes, oh my God. Now you have to understand the Rothko style of paintings, absolutely stunning, selling for tens of millions of dollars, just don't come up that often.
It's such a cool story. For the record, I definitely could pull off a Jackson Pollock fake. Personally speaking, I think I could do that. And I want to revisit something you said about Carlos. You said that he was buying and selling art. Some of them were fake. Did he know he was selling fake art back in, before he started to pull this heist or this scam off?
Absolutely. In fact, some of the characters in this book and in the film end up doing due diligence and hire a private investigator to look into Carlos's background because they kept faulting Anne. Why would you have not done the research? And they end up hiring a private investigator who uncovers the fact that Carlos has been banned by certain auction houses, that he has dabbled in fake art in the past. So he has been testing this plan for a while before he sends Glafira into the Noodler Gallery on that day.
How did Anne Friedman just so, I guess, easily believe that this was like a lost Rothko painting?
That's the greatest question in the book and in the film. What did Anne Friedman know? Now, remember, the con takes place over 10 years. Should she have known better? There were red flags along the way. One of the first paintings she sells, a Jackson Pollock, to a major executive at Goldman Sachs in New York, has it forensically tested, where the report comes back and says, fake, one of the first ones, and she gives him back his money and then attempts to resell it. So she keeps going. Many people have said, look, she just wanted to believe it was real. I don't believe that Anne Friedman got into this for it to be a scam. But Glafira was brilliant enough to connect the dots on the Rothko with backstories that sounded really interesting. But yet kooky in retrospect. This was from a Mr. X who didn't want it to disclose his relationship with a homosexual lover because his father would be upset. So he was now getting rid of this art, and it had been authenticated by it all sounded good. And Anne Friedman believed, like even the tombs of King Tut and the Barnes collection, that people discovered art, and it happens all the time. You heard those stories. I went to a garage sale. I bought a Van Gogh for $12 and it's worth, $120 million. She believed that happens all the time, that the art world is about discoveries. And so she believed it. And slowly over the years, as Glafira was bringing in more and more and huge varying artists, it's hard to believe, as one friend of mine said, hard to believe one artist painted all of it. But she just was so overwhelmed. And in her defense, in her opinion, she was sending the art to consultants. She was sending the art to other museums. Taschen was putting it on the cover of magazines. It was selling. Consultants were saying it was real. So she just went along with it and believed it.
When it's selling, how does that happen? Like, you don't just place an ad for it, right? Do you have to call the press and then hope that the right person hears about it and then they come in? Like, what's the process there? It's so like out of my realm of understanding.
Says the man who can create a fake Rothko. Well, I don't know that I believe that. Well, I look, Anne did not court the media. So her process was, and it's a great question, is that you have a Rolodex of collectors. She was very well connected in Hollywood. David Geffen, lots of interesting people, big collectors who are buying art. So you start to put the word out, and the word gets out. Plus, there's major art shows in New York and London, all over the world. The Armory show in New York, which is basically a convention for galleries, very wealthy people. It's open generally over a couple of days. Again, the first day, evening for serious collectors that go in, and those red stickers get on, stuff gets sold. The next day for another private group, and then the third day for what we call the unwashed, the public that come in who can't afford anything but want to look at beautiful art. Sometimes you do get people who buy things. So she was hanging this art at the Armory show and other shows around the world, and it was selling. Collectors came in. I have to have. Is that a Pollock? Is that a de Kooning? Is that a Diebenkorn? Robert Motherwell, stunning art, elegy paintings of black and gray, stunning. And so the word got out pretty quickly, and she was able to move art very quickly over the 10 years. Again, to give you the math, they pay Pei Shen Quinn, the Asian artist, a couple of $1,000. And only a little side note, he goes to the Armory one day just out of curiosity to look around and sees his art in the Noodler booth for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then goes back to Glafira and Carlos and says, hello, I think I'd like some more money. So they take him up to $6,000 or $7,000. So he's suddenly getting more money and thrilled. So he claims he didn't know. Of course he knew. And so the math is that they would, Anne Friedman would either take on consignment from Bergantinos and Rosales art or buy it for $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, not much more than that. And then Anne could sell it anywhere from a 200 to 800% markup, and maybe more. Paintings in some cases $7-8 million that she paid $600,000 or $800,000 for, and people had to have it. Collectors come in, you have to have it. You have to have it. Sometimes it doesn't make any emotional sense, but you have to have it. I want it. I see it. I fall in love with it. I have to have it. And then you have art consultants who, to me, are somewhat conflicted because they're telling you, Tim and Lance, this is really important for your collection. Here's what this art is about. This is what the artist was thinking at that time. And this is why this is important. And if you have it in your collection, this also gives you access to other pieces and other artists, and you're now an important collector. So you put that on your wall, and then you have a party in your Upper East Side mansion or in your home in the Hamptons or in Palm Beach, and people are walking in and, wow, Tim has a Rothko. Ooh, player. And that's one aspect of collecting, status. And the other are asset collecting. People are collecting because they think it will go up in value.
So how many of these fake paintings did Pei Shen Quinn paint?
Well, about 60, but probably a lot more. We know of 60 pieces. They're probably closer to, in the hundreds. When I found Pei Shen Quinn in Shanghai in his apartment by posing as a FedEx delivery man or whatever it was, his apartment was filled with art. stacks and stacks and against the wall of tons of art, very, very prolific. He claimed at that point he was really only painting for himself, but certain galleries were exhibiting his work in China, not fakes, but his own originals.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, just being able to do that and forge, I guess, different kinds of artists, doesn't that mean you're really talented too?
Incredibly talented. Tim, I went to Shenzhen, China, to a factory that makes art. You can buy it. Lance can call up and say, I'm emailing you a Pollock. I want this. I'm emailing you a Rothko. I want this. And in that factory, there were about 70 or 80 artists, all schooled in different genres and school of art, all painting, filling orders from around the world. And they're brilliant. The Chinese are taught to copy in meticulous detail. We've seen this in other luxury goods that come out of Asia that are brilliant, purses, scarves, things like that. We've seen those for sale. But in art, the meticulous line art and being able to just almost mathematically copy something was extraordinary. So in my documentary, Made You Look, I'm in that factory, and you see I've asked the artist to make me a Motherwell, a Pollock, and a Rothko, large scale, extraordinary. I want to reiterate for this podcast that these were copies, not fakes. I can't take my Motherwell, which is the exact same one that's sitting in MoMA, New York, and say, this is the same piece.
Okay, so that's the line between it being legal and illegal. Like, because I'm always wondering, like, what makes what they did illegal? Is it because they said that these were originals?
Correct.
Okay.
Fake signatures. They were brilliant in aging the art, using warped canvases, tea bags to stain and date things, finding nails and wires that were found in Patient Quinn's garage in Queens, New York, with envelopes that said Rothko nails, finding stuff that made it look authentic. Most people, Lance, are not going to go to the expense of having a piece of art forensically authenticated because it's extraordinarily expensive. Could be tens of thousands of dollars, could be $100,000 to go in and taste and test pigments. This happens, I talk about this in one of the chapters, A House of Beautiful Cards Falls Down, where, a hedge fund guy named Pierre Lagrange in Paris or London, I think, is getting divorced, and he needs his Pollock to be evaluated for insurance to split the proceeds between him and his wife. And the insurance company declares the painting to be fake. And he's shocked. He paid, I believe it was $17 million for it. And he flies to New York City and confronts Anne Friedman at the Carlyle Hotel and he says to her, I will set you on fire. I want my money back. This is a fake. And it's this infamous meeting. And again, he believed it was real. And it was definitely a fake, and he wanted it. I also should say, Lance, these collectors also were getting deals. So the consultants and other experts that were dealing with them said they were really getting, high-end art at a more reasonable price than usual. So that made it attractive too.
Gotcha. You mentioned that the forensic investigation, the forensics involved with determining whether or not the painting is real or fake, is extremely expensive. Is it intentionally expensive because maybe people really don't want to know that something that they own is fake, and they don't want to reveal that, Rembrandt's and Degas and Monet's, like, maybe people just don't want to have that reality hit that some of these classics aren't real?
I don't think the pricing of authentication is set to a point or such a high point in some Machiavellian way such as that. It's just very expensive in ultraviolet light testing and pigment testing. It's just an expensive process. You are right in that people don't want to know. In reference to this case, in some 60 fakes, only 10 or 11 people ultimately sue to get their money back. So where were the rest of the people? They were embarrassed, or they just didn't want to know. The De Soleil family wakes up one day, wife's in Florida, in Palm Beach, and reads an article in the New York Times saying fakes at the Noodler, and nearly has a breakdown and say, is our Rothko a fake? Oh my God. So most people don't want to know. Also, in a frightening way, some of the greatest museums in the world don't want to know. A former head of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City said that he believes that there's a massive percentage of fakes that are on the walls of great museums. Who knew what people were buying?
Right. That's the quote here. 40% of the Met's collection is potentially fake. Can that be accurate?
Well, somebody's alleging that. Nobody's going to test it. Some museums and galleries have works in their basement they've never brought up because they suspect is fake. So, you look the other way in this crazy world.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. And a thanks to our sponsors. Now back to the program.
Okay, so what happened when this whole scheme kind of, fell apart and the law got involved?
Well, what happens is that Glafira and Carlos, Bonnie and Clyde, are selling art to another gallery, the Julian Wiseman Gallery. Robert Motherwell's specifically, great artist, worth looking up. Often these artists are represented by estate foundations that manage the legacy, and they create a catalog called a catalog raisonné that has the official phone book of all the art that exists under that one artist. So this Wiseman Gallery calls in the Motherwell Foundation, called the Daedalus Foundation, to look at some Motherwell art that they're buying from Bergantinos. They authenticate it. And they give them a letter of, yes, it's real. It turns out that Motherwell is a fake. The Motherwell Foundation, or the Daedalus Foundation, is extraordinarily embarrassed by this. There's lawsuits flying. And then this Daedalus Foundation, again representing Robert Motherwell, finds out that Anne Friedman's got a bunch of Motherwells. So he goes over there to have a conversation with her and says, hey, Anne, I want to see your Motherwells. Doesn't tell her that he recently himself got caught up with a fake. And she's got some Motherwells and some other stuff. And he goes back to, takes pictures, he goes back to his office, looks at the records of Motherwell and says, these are fakes too. And he says to Anne Friedman, your Motherwells need to be tested. And she agrees, and then refuses to really let him see what the authenticator discloses. Because Rome is now burning. Uh-oh, the authenticators are now saying my stuff is fake. The guy from the Motherwell Foundation, Daedalus Foundation, Jack Flam is his name, is saying, wait a minute, I'm giving you an opportunity to set the record straight here. You have fakes. And God knows how many other fakes you have, and starts to find out what source they're coming from. Carlos Bergantinos investigates him, gives the Noodler Gallery an opportunity to sort of disclose the fact that they have a problem. He doesn't believe that Anne is part of this scheme, and Anne stops calling him back. And he's now afraid of his own reputation with Motherwell. He's getting sued elsewhere. And so he just wakes up that one day and says, screw it, I'm going to the FBI. Goes to the FBI. The FBI has a magnificent art crimes division, and they start to explore this and interview various people. They call Glafira in. At this point, Carlos goes, uh-oh. He gets on a plane to Spain and says, I'm screwed. Patient Quinn says, uh-oh, the Asian artist. He flies to China, and nobody's bringing anybody back from China. The FBI discovers that Glafira and Carlos are wiring large sums of money to Spain and to the Dominican Republic, where Carlos has a home. And all the FBI really cares about, and the district attorney, once the case goes to them, is they don't care about rich people getting con or fake art. They care about money laundering and wire fraud. And so if you're selling a painting, I'll make it up to somebody, for $1 million, you will have taken your commission as the dealer for $200,000, whatever it is, $150,000. And then the rest of the money would have been wired to whoever the art was bought from. In this case, they saw that Glafira and Carlos were keeping all of it. So they charge Glafira. They do interview Ann Friedman extensively. Jason Hernandez, former district attorney of the Southern District of New York. If you watch Law and Order and all that kind of fun stuff, that's you know all of these things. He interviews Ann Friedman. She lawyers up with a brilliant lawyer named Luke Nikas, who's a specialist in art crime. And they basically determine that they don't think they can charge Ann Friedman with anything. But by then, her reputation is now a problem. The New York Times breaks the story that suddenly overnight, the Noodler Gallery closes, shuts down, and also discloses that Ann Friedman was let go a couple of months earlier. So this is now getting really bad, and Friedman is angry. She's been let go, and the Hammers tell the world that she's been let go because of her medical issues, which was untrue. They were embarrassed. Michael Hammer was embarrassed by this whole thing. Come back to him in a minute. And Glafira is sitting in jail, but she still won't confess to anything. And the FBI and the DA goes to her and says, listen, unless you're prepared to tell us how this worked, then you're going to be looking at many years in jail. You have a daughter. Your boyfriend is taken off. The artist is taken off. And so she breaks down and finally confesses to everything. Bad day for Ann Friedman. Suddenly the art that she believed was real to that very day is now, that whole story is all over. So Ann Friedman's life ruined, lawsuits flying all over the place, the gallery settling lawsuits, she's settling lawsuits. It's bad. And Glafira goes to work as a waitress in a diner in New York City, and her life is over. The only guy sitting on a ton of money somewhere is Carlos Bergantinos and his brother Jesus, who went to Spain, and they could not get them back.
But you visited Carlos in Spain.
I found him. He gave no interviews, Lance, and I found an interview that he gave in Spanish to a journalist. So I reached out to his lawyer and I said, look, is he prepared? I got a documentary coming out. Is he prepared to set the record straight? Yes, under certain terms. And so we flew to Lugo, Spain. Never heard of it. A medieval town walled in. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Who goes to Lugo? 6 days, no nights. Anyway, off we went to Lugo. We went to his lawyer's office, who was like a Martin Short character in 60 Minutes, smoking one cigarette after another, and kept defending Carlos, who claimed it didn't speak English well. But thankfully, the lawyer would leave occasionally, so we were able to really grill Carlos. And he blamed Glafira for everything, and wouldn't really accept any responsibility. Great character. Walked in a Vicuna cashmere coat and a Prada suit and a beautiful burgundy tie, very elegant. He had had a stroke and some medical issues, crying, woe is me a lot. And we shot this fascinating interview with him. And here's the best part. At the end of the interview, he says, can I show you something I think you'd be interested in? He's conning me. And I said, sure. And out of a velvet bag, a little velvet sack that said Sotheby's, he takes out a harmonica and he says, this is Bob Dylan's harmonica.
But it wasn't, right?
$12,000. Would you like it? And my producer on the film, my partner on Made You Look, starts to negotiate with him. And I said to him, I said to him, Jay, are you crazy? He says it's Bob Dylan's harmonica. It could be Bob, whoever. It's nonsense. It's complete. He's conning me. He goes, yeah, but what if it's real? It's not real. It's not real. I mean, let's get out of here. Let's go into Lugo and have lunch. It's over.
Well, that's what is so fascinating about these stories is that, like, even if it was real, how do you put a value on that? musicians throw their guitar picks or their drumsticks into the crowd, and you don't have a bunch of people, selling them for millions of dollars. Like Bob Dylan's harmonica, I get that. It's cool to have, but like, is it $12,000 cool? Like,
well, again, he made up the price, and I look at Hollywood collectibles all the time, and you see what other comps have sold for, and is there again provenance? Is there a letter that says Bob Dylan owned this? You look for all this. This had nothing. It was a velvet sack, little piece of cardboard from a string that said Bob Dylan harmonica, 1972. Sure.
Okay.
But again, my partner in the film liked it. He wasn't paying $12,000, but he liked it. Thought it was cute. Okay. Had to have it.
He didn't end up buying it though, right?
No. He couldn't get the price he wanted. And I said to him, if you want a fun story, sure, go ahead, do some deal with him. I don't think Carlos was prepared to take his low end offer. And maybe it was real, because again, when Glafira gets arrested and then ends up having to forfeit and pay restitution in her sentence, she does no jail time other than the time she was sitting there waiting to confess. Her house is filled with real art. So over the years, they bought real art, and they traded fake for real. Even Anne Friedman traded some of her real art, and she had a great collection, for some of the fakes, because she felt it was more valuable. She didn't know she was buying fakes. Fascinating.
Yeah. So where are some of these characters now? Where is Anne Friedman now, and Glafira Rosales?
So here's the cast. Carlos Bergantinos and his brother Jesus are in Spain. Pei Shen Quinn is living in an apartment in Shanghai with his wife that his daughter bought them, and he's still painting away, House of 1,000 Paintings. Carlos, so that's Carlos. Carlos and Glafira had a daughter, Isola, or Iso. She, oddly enough, runs a gallery in Los Angeles selling big name art. And Anne Friedman is running a gallery called Friedman Art, 2 blocks away from the Noodler Gallery on the Upper East Side, and she continues to sell art. Is she respected in the art world anymore? Not at all. But she has a Rolodex. So if a family in transitional wealth wants to sell a very expensive artist a painting, then she'll make the calls and say, hey, I got a Motherwell for you. It's a deal. I got a this, I got a that. So, and her gallery in New York City, she features sort of new and upcoming artists, and she hangs in. It's unbelievable. As I said to Jay Hernandez, former Southern District Attorney, Assistant District Attorney, I said, would you buy a painting from Anne Friedman? And he just looks at the camera and goes, and no. But people do,
I have a question that is, mostly fielding your opinion. We have covered the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist pretty extensively. We're from the area in Massachusetts. It's the museum is in Boston. I'm sure you're familiar with the heist and the works that were taken. But we had a guest on, this gentleman who has been investigating it, and his theory is really interesting. He said that the heist wasn't about taking the paintings for any sort of monetary value. It was a piece of art that they were doing. It was exhibition art that they were doing. They were making a film of a heist, and the film is the heist. But one element of his theory is that the thieves left the frames because that was their message, that the frames are the only thing that you can actually apply value to. And they wanted to make that message heard by saying, look, we took the paintings, they're worthless. We're leaving the frames because that's the real value. What's your feeling on that part of that theory?
I'll never understand a thief that wants to send a message. So it's possible, but if I'm worrying about stealing a painting, I'm worrying about getting the hell out of there before I'm caught, and finding a way to sell it. These people who always left you saw this in films and books, and this person that left a lock of hair, or this is a person that turned a photograph over when he was robbing a house. All these messages. It's possible, but I've yet, in all of the documentaries I've made, and I've interviewed murderers and thieves and fraud artists and con artists, I've never met anybody that's that esoteric that wants to leave some kind of a message. He's right that probably the frame is the most valuable thing, because if you look at a painting, canvas is cheap and paint is cheap and everything else is cheap. Framing is expensive, so that's where it costs. So I remember with even framing some art, in a lot of cases, the framing is more expensive than the art that you bought. So it is a message. It's great, good for him.
Okay. You also said something about Michael Hammer, and you said we'll come back to that. I just want to revisit that. What was the thing that you wanted to come back to?
Michael Hammer, again, was not a great lover of art. His grandfather, Armand Hammer, was a great collector, and of course the great Hammer Museum in Los Angeles and Hammer Foundation. And his father was his grandfather's story was in a lot of ways, a Randolph Hearst character, and amassing great collections of things at great prices and buying things that no one else can buy. So Michael Hammer comes along and is sort of the well-tanned slickster who has the right last name. So he inherits this gallery, which is magnificent, and is preparing to sell it and dump it because the real estate market's at a high, and he could sell that gallery, that townhouse in the Upper East Side, for, I think he ultimately sells it for $30 or $40 million to Leon Black, another billionaire collector, and in comes the Rosales collection. And suddenly the gallery's on fire. He will tell you that he did not get involved in Anne Friedman's world, and he did not. Suddenly the gallery goes from being in trouble to now making millions and millions and millions of dollars. And he's buying himself a Mercedes Maybach, buying himself a Bentley, charging his American Express gallery card the $300,000 a month, and living extraordinarily well. And there was even some proof along the way that, somebody in the gallery in finance says to him, something's not quite right here. And everybody says to him, let's not kill the golden goose here. So even Anne Friedman called Glafira Rosales' whoever her connection was getting her the art, her husband, the secret Santa. So Michael Hammer's living extraordinarily well, and then, of course, claimed that he didn't know. And on that famous trial, the Domenico De Sole and his wife Eleanor, who bought the fake Rothko, they're interesting characters because Domenico's the man that transformed the Gucci empire when it was on fire, and creates Tom Ford. And he was the head of Sotheby's, chairman of Sotheby's. He buys a fake Rothko with his wife, and he's the only one that goes to trial to sue Friedman and Hammer. And there, finally, Hammer shows up to testify. They end up settling out of court, but walks into court with this long, flowing blonde hair, a deep Palm Beach tan in the middle of the winter, no socks, shirt open, and a blue velvet jacket in court, looking very Hollywood, saying, I didn't know anything. And everybody's waiting, the press is waiting for Michael Hammer and Anne Friedman to testify while they're looking at a fake Rothko in the courtroom. How are they going to get out of that? But over lunch, they settle.
That must have been a productive lunch.
Well, this has been a really great conversation, Barry. I just have one more question for you. Are con artists real artists, or should we find a more appropriate term?
I'm okay with it. I think there's good art and there's bad art, but there's art in everything. I don't think that we're beautifying or giving somebody a hall pass by saying artist and attaching that to the word con. Art is fabrication. Art is creativity. Art is imagination. And it could be used for good and it could be used for evil.
Great answer. Wow, that's cool. What are you working on now? What's next for your takedown of other other con industries?
Thankfully, the next two documentaries and after the book, The Devil Wears Rothko, one of them is a music documentary. So we were just filming Bruce Springsteen and David Letterman and others. So that's a little bit more of a softer landing. And the other one is an incredible rescue film, a documentary based on a real story. So no con artists in the horizon, but they're coming. They're coming.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Barry, for spending some time with us here today. We really appreciate all your stories here today, and it's a fantastic book. So congratulations on the book as well.
Hey, guys, thanks so much for having me on. Love it and look forward to hearing it.